we will move on to the project overview. Okay, so why North Street? Why are we here talking about North Street? Wanted to just run through a few points of why we're feeling like we need to talk about North Street here today. One of the biggest reasons is that North Street is one of the only streets that actually crosses the North River, connects people from North Salem into downtown Salem and other communities. And so from that purpose, or from that point of view, it's a critical connection for a really wide range of people. Obviously, it's just across the river from the MBTA station, which is a really key part of the transportation system for lots of people in Salem. And we want to make sure the street is supporting the multimodal function of the MBTA station. It's also a regional connection connecting to Peabody just on the other end to the north. Want to make sure that we're supporting that. A really big reason is that a lot of community processes that have already taken place have identified North Street for safety and access enhancements, and we're going to talk about some of those more specifically once we get into it. And then finally, new bike lanes were installed over the North Street Bridge in 2019, which is great, but they don't connect to anything to the north. And so as far as creating a network of facilities that people are comfortable using, we want to do what we can to try to make sure that North Street is connected into a full network. So a bit on our timeline, the dots in red are where we've been in the past. The blue dot is where we are today, and then the green line is where we're going. So just a few quick points on these, but I'm going to touch on a lot of these more detailed in a few minutes. But North Street was first identified during the 2010 Salem Bicycle Circulation Plan as a potential route for people biking. The Imagine Salem process took place over a few years in 2016 and 2017, called together folks from all different parts of Salem to talk about a really wide range of things, from housing to economic development to transportation, and really worked a lot with the community on a really wide range of topics that we are bringing into this process. The 2018 Salem Bicycle Master Plan updated what was done in 2010 and specifically identified North Street as an important connection. We saw some pop-up bike lanes happen in 2019 and were able to learn quite a bit from those, and a walk audit happened in the fall of 2019, which we're also going to be pulling on. So that has brought us to where we are today, which is just to say that people have been thinking about and talking about North Street for quite a while, and we're finally at the exciting moment where we get to think about what we should do. So we are here today to collect your feedback, to listen, to hear about what your priorities are, and then throughout later this summer and into the fall, we're going to be developing concepts, sharing them with stakeholders, revising them, and then ultimately we're going to be looking to do an implementation of some improvements in 2021. So just to clarify what the project area is, because North Street does in fact extend further down into the core of Salem, our study area is going to extend from the Peabody Town Line up at the north down to where the North Street Bridge starts, right around Franklin Street. And while we are here today to talk about, a really wide range of things related to North Street, and we're not confined to any specific kind of improvement type, we are hoping that this project in 2021 is something that can be implemented relatively quickly. So we're going to be looking at things that don't necessarily rip out sidewalks or rip out the curbs, but are things that we can add within what already exists there today. So again, you can please feel free, and we would like to hear the full range of things that you have thought about North Street or hope to see on North Street in the future, but just with an understanding that with whatever this project becomes in the near term is going to be something a bit more light touch. So I did want to just quickly run through some of those previous studies that I had touched on to give you an idea of what was in them in case you're not familiar. However, all of these documents are linked to the project website, which is www.publicinput.com/North Street, and that will be up on another slide. And most of you registered for the meeting through that link, so I encourage you all to go back there and look at all the work that was previously done for them. A lot of community voices went into it, and it is our starting point for this project. So again, 2017 Imagine Salem came out, was built on over, I think, 1,900 public comments, and it established guiding principles for transportation, which we're going to be using as our guiding principles for this project. And I just quickly wanted to run through what those were. So people of all ages and abilities should have options when choosing when they get around the city. The transportation system should be connected and multimodal. should be designed to enable people who want to use sustainable and active transportation modes. Obviously, it should be designed for safety. And then finally, the system should really fit into the existing neighborhoods. So whatever is implemented should really match what's there. Moving right along, so I mentioned that the 2010 Salem Bicycle Circulation Plan was where North Street was first pointed out as an important connection for people biking. And then in 2018, that idea was reinforced, especially given the success of the MBTA station. The Salem Commuter Rail Station, for those who don't know, is the most popular commuter rail station in the system outside of the core of Boston. It has very good ridership. And the majority of people who travel to and from the commuter rail station from Salem each day walk or bike, 58%. And so with North Street being that primary connection from the north to the train station, we want to make sure that people who walk and use other modes are able to do so safely and comfortably. And that's really was a key component of that plan. Some of you likely remember over the course of 5 weekends in the summer of 2019, the pop-up bike lanes came up. This was done, doing just cones, exactly as you see here, very quickly. And we were out there asking folks what they think. So we had folks with clipboards and surveys, just like you see here, asking folks if they wouldn't mind giving us a few opinions. And we learned quite a bit, both through this and through other channels. So just a few things we learned. One was that even inexperienced riders who don't ride their bikes frequently felt like they were fairly comfortable along these separated spaces when they had a designated spot to be in the roadway. But it's not to say that it was all rainbows and butterflies. We, of course, heard from folks that parking consolidation to one side of the street was challenging in some places, and also made safe and more frequent crossings much more important, as people maybe were parking on one side of the street, but their destination was on the other. So that was good feedback from that experiment. And then finally, to close out the discussion of plans, there was a walk audit completed in fall 2019. This was led by the advocacy group Walk Boston, who does these walk audits throughout the entire state of Massachusetts. And I just want to touch on the key recommendations that came out of that walk audit, which primarily were about making sure that the sidewalk was accessible for people in wheelchairs and continuous in that way, and also emphasize the need for more crossings and for the crossings to be more visible for people driving. And so those are both things that we're going to be taking into account as we move along. So that concludes kind of the plans or studies that have been previously done. And again, all of those are linked on the document center. When you go to publicinput.com, there's a sidebar and you can see all those documents there. But we have also looked at some data that I wanted to run through with you all. So far what we've looked at includes crash and safety history, parking patterns, and I just also wanted to briefly touch on the Better Bus Project, which is run by the MBTA. So for our crash history, we looked at crashes that have taken place over the last 5 years within the project area, which is shown on the map here. And nearly 30% of those crashes resulted in serious injuries or injuries of some kind. We're fortunate that no one has died on North Street, and we, of course, hope to keep it that way. So the crash history is an important just data piece for us as engineers and designers when we start to think about what some of the solutions could be for North Street. I also did just want to point out, you can kind of see if you blur your eyes a little bit that things look a little bit closer together, like there might be more crashes in the southern portion of the street. However, there are more of those green dots in the northern portion of the street, which are those non-fatal injuries. So those crashes that were more than just a fender bender and everyone went on their way. Somebody, an ambulance was called and somebody had injuries that needed to be tended to, and those seem to be more concentrated on the northern portion of the street, which is also where there's less activity and speeds are likely to be a bit higher. When we break out the crashes by mode, you can also see a little bit of a difference between the rate of injury. So 100% of the crashes involving people biking resulted in an injury, 33% of those walking result in an injury, and 26% excuse me, for those driving. And we know that injury data is highly correlated with speeds. This graphic here on the right shows you the likelihood of a pedestrian being killed or seriously injured at various speed thresholds for somebody driving. So at 20 miles an hour, there's essentially a 1 in 5 chance that a pedestrian hit by a car will be killed or severely injured. When you bump that up to, say, 40 miles an hour, that likelihood goes up all the way to 77%. So quite likely that someone will be killed or seriously injured at that speed threshold. And so we did want to break that down in terms of what we have seen for North Street. We collected data over a full week in February and March of 2020. So this was essentially the last week of February, heading right into the beginning of March. The speed limit right now on the street is 25 miles an hour. And we saw that 87% of people driving during that week exceeded the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. The average vehicle speed was 30, so you can see how that correlates nicely to that middle speed threshold right there. 16% of vehicles were over that 40-mile-an-hour threshold, and we saw a maximum speed of almost 80 miles an hour. So this is consistent with what we'd heard from folks previously and also already through publicinput.com, where folks are saying that speeding is something that they would like to see addressed. We did also complete a parking analysis in February 2020. This was in early February, so it was well before the pandemic had really taken hold. And we looked at parked cars on each side of the street, block by block, on a weekday, a Saturday, and a Sunday in February. We did not examine off-street parking lots through this, although there are a number of off-street lots littered throughout the street. And we collected data at 9 a.m., 12 p.m., and 8 p.m. each day. And we wanted to use this data to really look at two things. The first was utilization, which is how many cars are parked versus how many spaces there are. Just a kind of simple function of supply and demand. And then the second thing we were looking at was turnover, which is a function of how many cars are using each spot. So a spot that one car is there all day, we call that a low turnover spot. Only one car used that spot for the day. Versus a spot that's in front of maybe a convenience store that has somebody coming and going and coming and going, and you get 40 cars parked there throughout the day, we call that a high turnover spot. And so we learned quite a bit from the parking analysis, but here's just a few of the main takeaways. So there are 153 parking spaces on North Street in our study areas. These are on-street spaces again. On average, 90 spaces, or around 60% of the spaces on the street, are empty. And so that's the average across all days and all hours, and you can see the breakout by day, or weekday, Saturday, and Sunday in the charts. And though we would call that a low parking utilization, I think typically we'd aim for around 85% in an urban environment. It's not to say that parking was uniformly low. So there are certainly pockets where we saw consistently high parking use, specifically between Mason Street and the School Appleton and Orrin intersection, where we do see that more concentrated cluster of commercial activity. And so we did see quite a bit more activity there. And then finally, in terms of turnover, we found that about 40% of cars that parked on North Street are there all day. So the same car that was parked there at 8 in the morning was there at 8 p.m. And then finally, I just wanted to touch again on the Better Bus project. So for those of you who don't know, the MBTA is in the process of doing a system redesign, and they kicked that off with what they call the Better Bus project. And the Route 465 does run along North Street in our study area. For those of you who don't take the bus, you might not even know it exists. It's pretty infrequent and has low ridership. But it is there, and it does provide an important route for folks traveling between the Salem Commuter Rail Station and Danvers Square. And we were able to use what was done previously by the MBTA to get an idea of the ridership trends. We evaluated the bus stops that are out there now and found that the vast majority are not accessible for people in wheelchairs. So you can see in this picture, the grass there means that somebody in a wheelchair would have to travel along that grass to get onto the bus. Which is not the preferred condition. And just we've been in early coordination with the MBTA to make sure that we're apprised of what their plans are and that we're able to build in their future, vision for whatever the 465 is going to be with what we're doing on North Street. And so that could mean making sure that the bus stops are in the right places, that we have the right number of bus stops, and coordinating any accessibility improvements that would need to take place with those. So welcome back. Thanks everybody for your participation in that activity. I'm going to talk about more ways for you to engage in just a second, but just to reiterate where we are today, here we are at this public meeting in July. What's going to be coming up next? We're going to use this feedback and the feedback that we're going to continue to get over the next few weeks to then start to craft some concepts for North Street that we will be shopping around with stakeholders at a wide range of group meetings. And we're hoping to see many of you back at some of those. And we're going to iterate on those a little bit. So we'll revise based on feedback that we hear. And then finally move into implementation sometime, hopefully in 2021. But importantly, right now, I want to talk about the additional ways we have for you to engage. So I know that in my group, we ran out of time to talk about a mode or two. And I want to make sure everyone knows that the activity we completed here tonight as groups is available for everybody to complete individually on their own time, and it will be there for the next 2 weeks. It's not up yet, but it will be in the next day. So I will go ahead and send out an email to everybody who registers that they have the link to take the survey. If you want to add more detail or get to a section you weren't able to get to with your group. And you can also, you'll be able to rewatch this, and if you want to, pause on any of the slides to see what they say a bit more clearly, you'll be able to do that as well. So please look out for that in your email in the next few days, and it'll be pushed out through the city's other channels as well. Through the publicinput.com site, so again, that's publicinput.com/North Street. You're also able to connect with the project team via email. We've already gotten lots of emails from folks, so you can feel free to engage with us that way. And then also you can subscribe for periodic project updates. And there's also a little map activity there that we're going to keep up where you can drop a pin in a specific location and you can write a specific comment and people can click on it and see it, and they can give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down to indicate how they think of it as well. In terms of those small group meetings that I mentioned, so once we have collated all of the feedback we got here today and we've gotten to a point where we think we have a few options that balance the needs that we heard from today, we're going to be going out to the local neighborhood associations, the Traffic and Parking Commission. We'd like to talk to the folks from Salem Minimum Ages Task Force, the Disabilities Commission, the Bike Advisory Committee, and others to get their feedback in a smaller group format. That's going to be our kind of next stop on the public engagement journey. And we will again be updating folks through the subscription website through publicinput.com periodically. So please do sign up for updates to get those. So with that, we are going to wrap up about 10 minutes early, and I hope everyone is able to enjoy the rest of their evening, have something great for dinner, and enjoy the beautiful weather. And we hope to see you all back again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.